just over the last day. So you were just alluding to this, Ewok, and I find this conversation fascinating. So $122 million in ETH has been bought from these SAC wallets over the last couple of days. First off, I'm interested to know, why do you think there is now this accrual of ETH, especially up here at and this is what some of the critics of this move are saying, but the purchases of ETH that were averaged at about, and shout out, it's Martin, right? That account that we're following on Twitter that,
yeah, his handle Storyteller,
17
or 19 or something like that. But
he's real good. And you said it earlier today, like a lot of these influencers or whatever you want to call them, they will kind of quote what he says and put it out, later than he does, and sometimes not credit him. And he's seems like the guy to have the alerts on for lack of another way to explain it. But,
right.
But yeah, he looks like 3,700 was the average buy of ETH with these SAC funds. So again, naysayers are saying that, they panic bought the top of ETH and all these things. I want to get your take on this, Ewok, like that. This interested entity bought the top of ETH, and now we're going to start crashing back down, like we've talked about. I would just say that I don't look at it that way. Because I think there's a high likelihood it's already begun, and I wrote these notes before it began, but I think there's a high likelihood that BTC is going to dip hard after hitting the all-time high. It's already made a little correction. I mean, we're not, who knows? It's only happened today, but it made a pretty hard correction off of that pretty quickly. I think we are going to see BTC continue to dip like we talked about in the intro, and that ETH to BTC ratio, ETH was already kind of suffering a little bit against BTC. ETH also held up, people probably don't remember this now, but extremely well in the bear market. Like, it did really well in the bear market. It was very strong. You can say, oh, they bought the top of ETH at this point or whatever. And yeah, maybe that'll be true for like a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks. But I think when BTC pulls back here, I do not think ETH pulls back anywhere near as much. I think what we're going to see is BTC do a healthy, strong pullback over the next few weeks and months, and that ETH will not have as strong as a pullback, and we're going to have a continued alt season like we talked about last week. I think that ETH is going to do well. So you could say, like on the ETH to USD chart, like, oh yeah, the wallets bought the top or whatever. But in terms of the ETH to BTC ratio, I don't think that's going to be true. I think it's going to be ETH at a value actually against BTC. So I don't know. And there's probably more to the plan than that. I mean, we know nothing about what these people are thinking. So yeah, what do you make of it, Ewok?
Well, I mean, so it came from DAI, and I believe it was $216 million worth of DAI was the final total. So obviously it's, lost value against DAI, but you're right, against BTC, and what's it going to run up in the main bull run when things really take off? I think it's gonna, if it stays there, and doesn't get bridged, that's the other thing too. We don't know what the plan is for it, so I think it's not really fair to second guess what they did, because we don't know the final move for it. So I think it's going to hold up a lot better, yes, than BTC. It'll probably have better returns than BTC, and to have it somewhere, knowing that the ETF is just around the corner too. It could take off and really just surpass things, and I think it could have been a front run for that as well. Nobody's talking about that. I do think it got delayed again just yesterday or the day before. It's delayed, but Bitcoin was delayed a couple times too before it approved, and then once it did, it really just took off. I think this is low. I think we could see 12, 14,000, if not a little bit higher in the bull run as far as ETH goes. So, I think it's going to outperform Bitcoin. To get that kind of return from Bitcoin, you're going to have to see 300,000 Bitcoin to get that type of X's out of your money if it stays in ETH anyway. So, yeah, I think it's a better play. And I'm not really at this point concerned about the timing. I think things are strong enough where it's going to go up no matter what. Yes, it's going to pull back a little bit, but I think down the road, in the grand scheme of things, it's going to be just fine.
Yeah, and that was in response to the Grandpa Pulse comment about ETH going to 8 or 9K. Yeah, I think that is the probably like minimum bullish expectation for ETH. But I would want to be cautious around those numbers. I mean, most people think that ETH is definitely going to 20K, no doubt about it, blah, blah, blah. I want to be cautious around those numbers, just like Grandpa Paul said. But yeah, I do think it could surpass those numbers. I mean, that wouldn't even be a 2x off of last cycle. It topped out at 4,800 last year, or last cycle. So we'll continue to watch ETH, but I imagine that the entity that bought that ETH has maybe a couple of tricks up their sleeve and is aware of things like the ETH to Bitcoin ratio and things like that also. So yeah, we'll see. It's probably a local top versus USD here for a bit, but I'm not too worried about any of that stuff. So